At that moment, a Hindu deity located inside Cambodia is being knocked down, and since it is shown as Thailand, it would be destroying this monument within Cambodian territory. This speeds things up but also causes more internal problems at the border between these countries. Also, well, this fire is shown, this is in a market in central Java. Over there in Indonesia, the market has completely burned down. And this, well, also draws attention today. Another important image is this place. That's a ship you see in the background. It's a ship that specializes in repairing other Russian ships. Well, that ship has been completely burned. That mechanical ship has been destroyed, so to speak, a ship that helps other ships get repaired. On Russia's side, by the way, in Novgorod it was reportedly completely burned. For now, it's not clear whether it was an attack or something else. Also, well, we'll talk about what's happening there in a little while. Well, the expulsion of Russian diplomats over there in Poland, they're being expelled. When the last consulate closed, only the embassy remained. We'll now discuss the details of what's happening between Russia and Poland, along with this image. Let's listen to what J.D. Vance says. On the topic of the Netherlands, I want to talk,
of course, about the interaction and what I think Denmark has done.
Some say that Denmark doesn't do enough for Greenland's security, but that there are many risks for the Greenlandic people. And basically, they are the ones who can protect the Greenlandic people. From Russia, from China, from incursions, he says from China and Russia. And well, the question would be, what incursions? What attacks has Greenland had with China or Russia? Obviously, well, these are comments from J.D. Vance with the narrative of wanting or trying to keep Greenland. Let's discuss some reactions to this now. Also, well, it shows a difficult night for Ukraine and also for Russia, and that's because of this image we're seeing in Sevastopol, in Russia. A petrochemical plant was destroyed. We'll also talk in a moment about the blackouts that have happened in Ukraine, massive blackouts. A large part of Ukraine was left without electricity, and that also makes things more complicated. You're there in the background, that lighting, that light. It's part of the fires seen at the Stavrolen petrochemical plant in Budyonovsk over there in Russia, a region that's within Stavropol. Prof, well, the situation is tremendous. Meanwhile, well, you can also see this image. What I was telling you about Baduro, who's quite the dancer. Now they're showing him with this robot. And well, these are some of the images that are circulating, trying to show calm amid the increasing pressure on his regime. Another thing that stands out is the web stand of Mexico. So do you share this image of Popocatépetl? It's totally covered in snow, right? This is as of today, December 22, as the date says there, December 22, 2025. Well, Popocatépetl looks very beautiful, very nice, all covered in snow. And well, that's also part of what can be seen today. And another image that draws attention is these ships, these Chinese military forces that have been showing images of what they're using around Taiwan, stating in a Pentagon report that China would be ready to invade Taiwan in 2027. They could even speed things up a bit more, but the report states that by at least 2027, they would be prepared to invade Taiwan, and in a very intense way. Now, well, Taiwan also knows about this. They have the report, and we'll see what their reaction will be. Meanwhile, in the Caribbean, these hawks are being observed. I mean, hawks. These helicopters that have been deployed are basically working, you could say, day and night, 24 hours in the Caribbean. These are the helicopters that are being used the most against, they say, organized crime groups within the Caribbean. Right now, there's also another image from the United States. Another topic that draws attention is these floods happening in Java, over in Indonesia, floods that are still ongoing. We have already shared some of this activity recently, and well, it continues in that region of the world. Meanwhile, there was also this earthquake. An earthquake that was initially reported as magnitude 6, but now it's known to be 5.9. I'm sure they'll report this in Kamchatka, over there in Russia, in the Pacific. This area, which is very active both volcanically and seismically, is experiencing not just one, but several earthquakes. But this one here is the most significant earthquake in the last week, at least with a 5.9. With a reported depth of 60 kilometers, there was no tsunami warning. It felt intense, but nothing major happened. And that's because very close to there, to Kamchatka, I mean, relatively speaking, in Japan, well, there was a major earthquake also yesterday. Do you remember? And well, there was also a series of earthquakes above 5. Now, there's also this other earthquake. This one stands out because it's quite intense. We talked about this yesterday. Do you remember there was an earthquake of 6.2, 6.3 around there? Well, now another earthquake is being reported, again in Papua New Guinea. That's 2 earthquakes now. 6.2 yesterday, 6.5 today. They're all very deep, luckily, and that means they don't hit Papua as hard. But we must remember it's one of the planet's most seismic areas, like Indonesia, right? This whole region is one of the most seismic, with some of the highest activity on the planet. So, well, we should also take this into account. Recently, the Pacific has seen several major earthquakes. And another interesting topic that we should consider is what's happening in the Pacific on the American side as we head toward Alaska. Looking at this activity that has been happening recently, well, there are 2 things that stand out. One is this swarm that continues, by the way, a seismic swarm that has been active between Alaska and Canada. Yes, this is what has been observed in recent days. This activity we see is activity that they say would be atypical, but it's not so atypical anymore. It hasn't posed any risk. To begin with, because very few people live here, it's a very sparsely populated area in this region, but still, it's also important. Let's go with information about what's happening with Atlas, because there are at least 3 impressive facts about topic 3 and Atlas that we're going to be talking about. Well, in just a few moments, thank you for joining us. Let's go with the information about what's happening in the world. According to reports, right now this image is being published of a merchant ship with a Turkish flag that was transporting cargo from Ukraine to Turkey. A kamikaze drone attacked it in international waters in the Black Sea. There were moments of danger. The number of Turkish ships hit by attacks has been increasing. There have been 4 recently. And this, well, could also generate reactions from Turkey. In fact, one of those drones even reached Turkish territory, do you remember? Another one of the drones, which was also heading towards Turkey, was shot down by a Turkish F-16. So, well, there have been some complicated situations lately between Turkey and Russia. We will be keeping an eye on that. In the meantime, let's move on to several important matters today. Do you remember this scientist from Massachusetts Institute of Technology who took his own life? He was a scientist specialized in the field of, well, a new technology that was going to revolutionize the field of artificial suns. That there was going to be a major change, at least in the United States, but it could even be worldwide. If his research kept working, his life was taken by another Portuguese man who, as we now know, had quite a few problems. It's not exactly clear why, but it is revealed what he was researching. His name is Nuno Loureiro. He was leading a revolutionary fusion reactor, and his life was taken. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology professor, Nuno Loureiro, 47 years old. His life was taken by an acquaintance, or possibly a colleague, 48 years old, 1 year older, also from Portugal and a scientist. And he was considered the key figure in research on a type of fusion energy, a technology that promised to replace all energy as we know it today. Authorities suspect that the shooter, well, now it is known that it was Claudio Neves Valente, who was also involved in the shooting on December 13 at Brown University. But what's interesting now is that he may have discovered how the process that powers the sun works. And this led him to have a project that could generate continuous energy without emitting polluting gases, without relying on large amounts of fossil fuels or anything like that. They claimed that, well, this was going to be it, as the scientist himself said, that the nation that mastered the technology he was developing would have an incredible advantage over other nations. I mean, come on, it was going to be. The nation that managed to develop what he was achieving would be at the forefront. Suddenly, his life was taken. Reports indicated the impact would be immediate in high energy consuming sectors like data centers, transportation, and heavy industry. Would it revolutionize this? Over $8 billion had been invested in fusion projects in the United States, but this one drew the most attention. So, well, I think this case just keeps getting stranger and stranger. Police are investigating the motive. It is known that Oreiro and Valente met in Portugal in 1995 and again in 2000 at the Instituto Superior Técnico. However, their current relationship is unknown. It is not clear whether they had a relationship or not. Neves Valente, who obtained permanent residency in the United States in 2017, was linked to both the scientist's shooting and the December 13th shooting. After the identity was revealed, Trump himself suspended the green card lottery program, which had allowed Valente to legally remain in the country. Dennis White, a colleague from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, described the loss as immeasurable. He emphasized that Oreiro was the central figure for the international research community in the field of plasma and fusion. In other words, he was the head, he was the central part, and they take his life. Obviously, this is becoming more and more suspicious. Let's move on to other important matters happening in the world. And look, first of all, let me tell you that the whole Einstein thing, the Einstein topic, Trump, and all of that is taking some incredible mind-blowing turns. Information has just been revealed where he is mentioned a bunch of times in topics that are on the edge of absurdity, of madness. Be careful, as more is being leaked about that topic. Well, one is the official information that's coming in really strong, and the other is also the series of leaks. Because part of the information they had hidden, well, it turns out it wasn't hidden very well. Those black blocks, those black squares, they put them on with Microsoft, didn't they? I mean, they didn't use real paint, so a lot of people are managing to remove those black squares, and that information is still there. So, there are some very interesting things coming up about this, which we'll be discussing as they come up, and we'll talk more about that later on. We'll also discuss what's going on between Poland and Russia later, and 13.3 is remarkable. Both a signal that has been detected and a series of discoveries that have just been made in the 13 Atlas. Which makes you think that maybe this strange theory that this artificial robot could have, well, more weight can't be ruled out. Maybe to understand exactly how this works, but it is showing that there is something strange in the 13 Atlas even more than what was previously thought. We'll discuss that topic now, but first let's cover some key points. Let me prepare the comments. Thanks to everyone joining us and for your comments. We'll continue shortly. We will be reading them with great pleasure. And, well, to everyone who is already in the Christmas, New Year's mood and all that, I'm really glad. Here, a big hug. And obviously, we are also trying to celebrate here with you and with Jaga too, here as a family. No, obviously. So thank you very much for being here and for all the comments you make to me. Look, there are several things I would like to talk to you about. So, things keep taking turns, let's say, in all these end-of-year stories. Let's say I wouldn't want to get into a topic that has to do with these publications I'm telling you about. One of the publications was posted by The Guardian. Wow, it truly is amazing because it's a topic that needs investigation, whatever you want. But The Guardian publishing this is another matter. The situation is intense. There's a conversation that takes place between a character who is already in jail. By the way, this individual who, as is known, had, well, now it's clear, committed abuses against young girls who are in gymnastics. Don't you remember that case? Well, not only did Jeffrey Einstein and this person communicate with each other, but they also talked about Trump himself. And within this, obviously, it's creating a lot of tension because what they're saying, the comment is something like, he says, Einstein tells him, and to this person says, look at this. You and I are on the same wavelength of supporting, quote unquote, right? Of supporting these girls so they can reach their potential, these young ladies. And he says Donald Trump is also, and he also likes and also loves, let's say, these little ones, and he also kind of likes them to reach their potential. Let's get to the point. I want to show this person's image in case you remember him. Documentaries have been made about this individual, and well, he knows quite a lot about him. It's this person, Einstein, obviously, right here, right? His name is Larry Nassar. There's a Netflix documentary about him. Have you seen it? It's a disturbing letter, at least if it says the following. This letter seems to have been written by Jeffrey Einstein and sent to Larry Nassar, the doctor for the United States Olympic gymnastics team, convicted for having done unspeakable things. Let's say to these kids, no, as you already know, it says, I have taken the shortest way home, says the letter, which appears to be signed by Einstein and addressed to Nassar. Good luck. We share one thing, he says, our love and affection for young people and the hope that they reach their full potential. If he says this already, but well, that's quite a comment, isn't it? And he says it, or as you already know, well, he says it. The letter continues, our president, because it was during President Trump's first term, right? And our president also shares our love for young Nobel women. When it happened, a young beauty loved to snatch his food away, while we ended up snatching food in the system's cafeterias. The letter was signed by Einstein and says sincerely, J. Einstein. It doesn't mention anything else. But this is just one of many more comments that are made only about the latest data. There's also another point that also breaks with everything that the official narrative was trying to say. Trump is said to have used Einstein's plane 8 times, meaning he traveled more times than was reported. And that will have to be investigated. The President of the United States flew at least 8 times with Jeffrey Einstein on his private plane from 1990 to several years later. No then, so it indicates that there is a kind of relationship that hadn't been mentioned. If it was claimed there was 1 or 2 flights, it was actually 8. And those are just the ones we know about because they're still bringing out more documents and more documents. But the thing that's coming now, when these waves of data and documents start coming in, watch out with what's happened, because what's going to happen, I'm not sure, but interesting things will happen, especially in the news, right? I mean, we're going to see more pressure, maybe on Venezuela, we're going to see some other news. In the end, something has to be discussed, right? And other approaches could also come up. Let's say no. Something that draws attention and that isn't talked about so much, it's a matter that's just coming up today. So, well, all the media, right? There, yes, conservative media, more liberal media, everyone is talking about this topic, right? Only a little bit of that information is coming out. So, well, surely from now until the next few days, before the end of the year, a wave of information is coming in on that, along with possible White House reactions we'll discuss later. Well, a series of reports are being made about what's coming regarding the climate for this season and for the upcoming year. And we're going to start revealing some things that are really interesting, right? One of the points is the Christmas heat wave, which could break dozens of records, according to what they've said. They posted this. Let's try to display it on the screen. But they made this post in which they show the heat zones with temperatures shown in Fahrenheit. Yes, so the lighter areas are 20 Fahrenheit, the darker areas are 80 Fahrenheit. Yes, that's from now until the holiday season, which is basically the first days, the 24th, 25th, 26th, right before the last days of the year, let's say. According to what National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration itself reports, the overall outlook could break a lot of records, according to what they've stated. And well, part of this, let's say, yes, of this... December almost feels like summer, doesn't it? Some areas could even reach temperatures of 30 degrees like here. What we've been seeing in northeastern Mexico, since we're right next to Texas, so we get those temperatures that we're seeing there. On screen, we're not seeing several records for cold temperatures, but for heat during this time. Yes, according to reports, the unusual heat wave is breaking Christmas records. On one hand, it's flooding California with a lot of rain and storms and all that, but it's also exposing other areas to temperatures between 26 and 30 degrees. A surprising heat wave is unfolding in the middle of December across much of the United States, especially in the southern part, where dozens of Christmas records are being broken. The phenomenon isn't completely unusual since it's happened in other years, but this time it looks like it's going to break records. The event is at least 2 or 3 times more likely to happen in the coming years due to what's happening with climate issues. All these changes in temperatures? The heat comes from a high-pressure system pushing warm Gulf of Mexico air into the southern and southeastern United States. It's this area, from here the entire heat wave we're experiencing right now is being generated. So, let's see if we can update this to the 25th, which would be this month, December 25th, and there would still be a heat wave. Well, it's important. Not the one we see there, like southern Texas at 27 degrees. And it's pretty much the same over in Florida. Well, a little higher, 25, 24 degrees Celsius, but still, let's say, warm temperatures as well. It's 25 for December, correct? Cities in regions like Georgia, Alabama, and the Carolinas will even reach temperatures between 21 and 25 degrees. California, meanwhile, is dealing with another new atmospheric river, along with the bomb cyclone phenomenon we discussed yesterday. Torrential rains bring a flood alert for an area where 40 million people live and a risk of mudslides, rock slides, and therefore also potential sudden water rescues, according to the National Weather Service of Los Angeles. The National Weather Service spokesperson warns that the threats of significant and widespread flooding in the urban region are high for this area, this part of California. And we see that from today, the 23rd to the 26th, a large amount of water is generated in this area. Well, we saw this yesterday, and today, well, they make a report saying that the chances increased to almost 300 millimeters of rain, 270 millimeters of rain in 3 days. We have reported that hurricanes in 3 or 4 days only generate 150 millimeters, that's it. Just to give us an idea, if there are hurricanes that reach 100 or 150 millimeters in 2 or 3 days, this time it's not a hurricane, but it brings a huge amount of water. And if I go further ahead, if I add the days that are coming, well, the water just keeps adding up, right? If we look at the next few days, we can see how little by little more and more millimeters are being added to this whole area, and now in some places it's even going to exceed 300 millimeters. Not all areas are the same. There are areas where it's going to rain much less. Obviously not, but we're looking at the maximum points. And well, it is surprising. Above all, it seems that the biggest problem is for Southern California, that is, towards Los Angeles. Yes, if it happens just as it's being observed, well, it will have or bring important consequences, right? That's why the same service says or warns about potential flooding. Additionally, heavy prolonged snowfall is expected in the Sierra Nevada mountains, complicating the area's weather outlook. But what is certain is that there's a lot of water, right? Well, within everything, that's actually positive in terms of water supply for the dams and all that. We have to remember that in this area of California, in previous years, there were a lot of wildfires. This will bring plenty of humidity and water accumulation, which will hopefully be positive. But it's an excess, and with excesses, there are also risks. Within this report, you can also see how this phenomenon of very warm temperatures is expected for the 25th, yes, for the 24th, and so on. Well, it's also happening in Mexico, right? Obviously not in the areas where we see temperatures, well, in regions like the north, which is usually cold in winter. Well, obviously right now, well, I'm wearing short sleeves. We've been showing you the outside these last few days. I think it got cloudy today, so at least the clouds will lower the temperature a little bit. But it's been like that, right? Almost like a spring or an early summer. Not very, very warm, let's say, this winter. So, well, that's what's expected. Let's see if these records are confirmed as the year ends. These are the year's final days, and we're about to start January, which we hope will be colder, since it's January. If it keeps going like this, it would be crazy, right? Because you wonder, what can we expect for summer, right? I mean, how is summer gonna be? If winter was like this, at least that's what you imagine, right? You wonder how summer is going to be. People talk about the El Niño phenomenon, but well, we'll talk more about that later. Meanwhile, that's how things are. So now let's move on to what's happening with the three. And Atlas. No, it's very relevant and important, and I think it changes many perspectives. Let's get into the details. What's happening with the 3 and Atlas? Because, well, it's drawing attention again. And they claim, well, that history is being made with what's being discovered right now. The 3 and Atlas are showing a series of, well, movements, even signals that make people think there's something more there. Let's go over several details of what's been discovered. First, a very scientific part, but a very interesting one. And it's that scientists in Spain have detected a periodic oscillating jet of gas and dust emerging from the core of the interstellar comet. The phenomenon had never been recorded in one of these types of objects, and the team of astronomers made this discovery. They say it's unprecedented in Comet 3 and Atlas, one of the few known objects that come from interstellar space. And they say that with a 2-meter twin telescope, a 2-meter twin telescope, 2-meter twin telescope installed in Spain, the researchers detected a periodic jet, a localized stream of gas and dust which is activated regularly like a kind of astronomical clockwork mechanism. This observation would present for the first time what is being detected, a phenomenon of this kind in an interstellar comet. Thank you. It's something rarely seen even in other comets. Now, I found this research by the Spaniards very interesting, but check out these new pieces of information that have been coming up. There are several facts that are really surprising. And what does the website say in its publication today? Not only can we not rule out that its origin is artificial, but we should continue to consider this possibility. Careful, it's not saying that it is. With the data we have, we still can't confirm that it's artificial, but there is more information coming up that could support that idea. According to the researcher Loeb, a crucial update has been published. Pay attention, new data about the size has just been released, and apparently, new information about signals being emitted from the comet has just come out. And what he says is that in the coming days, a lot of information is going to start coming out little by little. Yes. First of all, the interstellar object. 13 Atlas is emitting radio signals that, although they are not conclusive yet, could be closely related to the strange behavior of 13 Atlas. Researcher Loeb has published an update that could be crucial, in which at least 2 key findings are revealed. First, the Allen telescope array recorded 74 million lightning strikes. An observation that was made practically since the beginning of the 13 Atlas, since July 2nd. That's when it was discovered, right? But with these emissions, these signals, there's a lot of noise. There are many things that are just interference. You need to recalculate and note the altitude, speed, and other details. And out of these 74 million narrowband radio hits, it was found that only 211 hits aligned with the exact position of the 13 Atlas. In other words, 211 possible signals. But so far those signals, well, we don't know, they couldn't be absolutely certain they came from there. Instead, they put it out there and say, well, it seems like there's a signal range between 1 and 9 hertz. A signal was mainly detected both in the beam panel and in the external beam, which matches the frequency assigned to the fixed satellite service in space when detecting a signal that is very similar to the one sent by satellites. What was said then is that it is most likely a local interference and not a signal coming from the 13 Atlas. At least that's what is thought right now. After eliminating other options, they confirmed the signal came from the 13 Atlas, but noted it closely resembled signals sent by their satellites. Well, since that's not possible, then they rule it out. There it is, it's something that really makes you think. At the time, there were signs that they were trying to interpret or understand. Starting from July, August, September, and so on, that haven't been published. I don't know if they're going to get published. I hope they do, right? Another finding that's key to understanding this, and that makes all of this even stranger. You might wonder, what kind of phenomenon are we discussing? Thank you. In a second study, non-gravitational accelerations and mass loss were analyzed, and from all the data, it was possible to measure the nucleus again. Yes. And it turns out the nucleus is not 5 kilometers nor 6 kilometers. Nor should we forget to give a bit of context to this so that the strangeness of all this can be understood. This image, by the way, has some details. This is the photograph. Rice astrophotographer, an astrophotographer from Austin, Texas, an amateur by the way, but who has actually been quite professional in the images he has managed to capture. Everything that we see as the comet or as the object, this one, which is all of this. We have to remember that we're talking about thousands of kilometers, that's right, the visible part, not what is the coma of the comet, the object, the nucleus, the comet. It's somewhere in the middle there. Based on the new data, it measures 1 kilometer in size. That's what it tells me. We're discussing thousands of kilometers with 1 small kilometer right in the center. That would be the nucleus, and all that information, all of it, that cloud, that bubble that comes out, comes from that nucleus. And here's where it gets strange. A second study analyzed non-gravitational accelerations, mass loss, and related factors. Based on all this data, it was estimated that the object's nucleus is about 1 kilometer in diameter, a size that is too small for such an intense object. Another situation, another finding, which is really surprising, is that we're talking about an object that's too small but has emitted and generated a great deal of intense activity. And pay attention to the following points, because here come several facts that have been confirmed or have even been surprising. For example, now with the new information that's available, it's like suddenly all the information was released and the publication started coming out. It's incredible, isn't it? The non-gravitational acceleration, this acceleration that's very extensive, very strong, it's surprising. It's not being explained now with the information we have by jets of material expelled in the preferred direction. Let's say the jet goes that way, so it's throwing energy backward and pushing the object forward. Let's put it that way, right? Possibly related to the changes in the emission of the jets. Keep in mind, it's possible that the acceleration is more due to the ejection of fragments, solid fragments like ice rather than gas. At thermal velocity, as suggested by a study done by Loeb himself and by Eric Keto himself, both of them proposed, well, a kind of thermal gas, right now? And Loeb publishes it himself. I mean, he says, well, this part of the study with the new data, it shows that it's not thermal, but rather it seems to be due to the expulsion of fragments. Possibly it can't be ice, which is also surprising because you say, well, if there was all that fragmentation, why is the comet still there? What's more, why does it have the intensity it has? If you have, let's say, a piece of ice, so to speak, about 1 kilometer in diameter. They haven't been obtained yet, and that's still missing, and that part needs to be clarified because that's going to determine a lot of things. It hasn't been obtained. The spectroscopic measurement is a measurement in which the speed of the jets will be detected. This would be available to the James Webb Telescope. At the moment they publish it, it will fill a big gap in the information that exists right now. What is the speed of the jets? With that, you can perfectly determine, hey, is this jet speed natural or not? It is, right? Why? Because chemistry is the same all over the world. I mean, well, in the universe, I mean, yes, with small exceptions, but chemistry is chemistry, right? Come on, it reacts the same everywhere. Yes, for example, if you say this is a bunch of this chemical, a bunch of energy, well, it would have to have a maximum of this speed for it to be natural. If it goes beyond that, many times you say, hey, wait, what combination is happening there in chemistry for it to react that way too? Strangely, it still hasn't been published or done after all this time. The speed of the jets, I already talked to you about that a while ago, not just a few days or weeks ago. That's it. That's the basis. I mean, having the speed of the jets. Hey, look, if the jets are coming out at a normal chemical reaction speed, perfect. That's it, right? One more point for number 3. You act like a natural comet. Or you know what? Well, no. Its chemical reaction actually seems more like an artificial process. I mean, it couldn't happen naturally. Well then, let's say it's at least semi-artificial, not a combination. There's still the measurement of jets missing. That's another issue as well. Well, we have to take into account the Hubble images, the before and after of the perihelion, because these images hadn't been given to the astrophysicists either. Well, more information and more images are reported and given to the astrophysicists, showing them, with this, the confirmation of the antitail. Well, it has been doing what was mentioned here, which is moving around, not just pointing toward the sun. But there are still things missing in terms of information, so we can leave this point and wait a little longer. He says that right now they're trying to understand how those jets work, how that jet changes depending on how the sun is being observed. And also adapting to the comet's rotation, right? Another notable point is the 16-degree deviation at perihelion due to the sun's gravity. The acceleration of the jets, before and after, they almost cancel each other out, affecting the estimation of the object's actual size. That's why, so far, it's believed to be about 1 kilometer, although more information could come in according to the website. That could change the perspective on its size, so there are still doubts about that. And another point, which I think is an even more interesting discovery. It's confirmed that since November, the object has been slowing down. They haven't provided the speed, so I'm left wondering, right? And we'll have to wait for more information, but it has been slowing down since November. There's a theory that claims one of its jets is going against those streams of material and is slowing the object down. Right? That would be a possibility, but let's wait and see. Okay. But it is slowing down, which I had already mentioned to you here. Calculations showed the speed dropped from 245,000 kilometers per hour to 210,000, then sped up again. At perihelion, it accelerated to 245,000 kilometers per hour. Afterward, they discussed 220,000 and 222,000 kilometers per hour. It rose from 210,000 to 245,000, then fell to 222,000, slightly higher overall. Now they say that, well, the deceleration has been constant. They're not saying that Jupiter is braking or anything like that, just that it's slowing down a little. They haven't confirmed how much the speed as well. Well, they confirmed the cyanide and hydrogen cyanide, which are, well, toxic, quite toxic. By the way, but they could be, for example, a signature of a chemical that's related to life, right? We fell over there, our camera has fallen. Let's see if it's watching us and comes to save us. But well, it's part, let's say, of what's happening, right? The particles of solid fragments, the particles smaller than 1 micrometer, do get deflected by the pressure of solar radiation. These are the objects, well, particles that could even be reaching Earth, but they would burn up in the atmosphere because there was talk about the possibility of particles from the object reaching Earth. The truth is, well, what they say is that it's simply unlikely. I mean, yes, even if they did arrive, the particles would be too small and the atmosphere would simply end up destroying them, right? So in response to that question, well, no, right? Now, there is a very interesting topic that Loeb mentions, which is what would happen if the object were a probe? Let's imagine the object was there thanks to you. Milligrams. Well, I can hear myself right now. So, what would happen if this were a probe that was leaving small probes for research? Something like that, right? I mean, that's one possible topic. Well, Loeb clarifies that the entire analysis is obviously based on the assumption that the fragments had the ability to maneuver. And if that were the case, well, then it could be observable, right? If the material left behind suddenly behaved oddly, it could be detected, right? And you could say, you know what? Well, apparently there are some small probes there, right? That are doing things that aren't strange, right? But, well, that's just simply speculation, right? He says the same thing. You can't really see something like that right now, can you? So, well, at least it's very interesting, right? Isn't it? We think the 3.7 still has a lot to say, doesn't it? Both because of the possibility of strange signals and the potential chemistry. Its size and speed are strange. There are still many things that will have to be explained in the coming days, right? Let's move on to some other very interesting information about what's happening with the Russia-Poland issue. If you'd like, we can now discuss the TSE Atlas topic more in the comments. One moment, okay? Amazing, right? They're lowering the Russian flag. Let's listen to this moment. Well, with the anthem in the background, right? The Russians would have finally been expelled, right? In this movement of increasing tension between Poland and Russia, and the thing is, there was still a consulate left, there was still an embassy, but let's say it was the last Russian general consulate in Poland. The Russian consul general, Benanzgai Smilov, urged visitors to contact the consular department of the Russian embassy in Warsaw. I mean, the Russian people who live in Poland and, well, you know. Do they have any paperwork to do? For one thing, they'll have to go all the way to Warsaw, right? That was the point. They won't be able to anymore. There were several consulates in different places. Well, for a long time, Poland has accused Russia, especially the consulates, of basically being a base for spies who are up to no good, right? So in Poland, have they been expelling several of them? Yes, if I remember correctly, it's about 50 people from 2022 to now, if not more, but around that number. That information is from a while ago. But what's happening right now is tremendous, because it shows how it's happening. Yeah, well, there's an increasingly clear break between these two countries. What's happening? Let's get into the details. The last Russian consulate general on Polish territory, located in the port city of Gdańsk, officially closed its doors on December 22. Earlier today, Just a few moments ago in the morning for us, in the early hours, this move was already taking place. Let's go to the area to see where this Polish port is located. It's in this area. Look, it's in this area. That's where this would have happened, right in the Baltic Sea, as you can see, right? Very close to Kaliningrad. This was the last consulate. Now the only one left is the embassy in Warsaw, and that's the last connection that Poland has with Russia. If they withdraw the ambassador, that's basically it. Well, that would be a complete break, right? But it's close to being a total break if things keep going like this. Consul General Sergei Siminov, through a video message, stated that this closure is driven by a unilateral decision of the Polish government, which marks the end of the Russian consular presence outside of Warsaw, reducing diplomatic contact to a single point at the embassy in the Polish capital. Siminov expressed his regret over this measure, which is part of a series of gradual bilateral diplomatic closures. Warsaw had reportedly announced in November that it would close the Gdansk consulate on December 23. And in retaliation for this, well, Moscow, today the 23rd, its doors closed, yesterday the 22nd, but today marks the complete closure. Today is the final farewell. Now, this episode is not isolated. This has been going on for some time. 2022, the relationship ended. But in October 2024 is when the consulate started to be shut down more intensely. October 2024 and now December 2025, well, the closure is almost total. Poland has closed Russian general consulates in Poznan and Krakow as well, which led Russia to also close the counterpart Polish consulates in St. Petersburg and Kaliningrad. Everything shows a steady decline in diplomatic relations between Moscow and Warsaw. Fueling. Well, all of this is because of the war between Ukraine and Russia, and also the issue of, well, the hybrid war inside Poland. We have to remember that there have even been explosions on these train routes. There has been a series of attacks that have become more and more concerning. For example, Facebook, a network banned in Russia. And that's also part of what is happening with this issue. There are several issues. So, quickly, in March 2022, which is when I told you the conflict started, 45 people with Russian diplomatic status would be declared persona non grata and were expelled from the security agency, according to the Internal Security Agency, who had accused and identified them as possible intelligence officers or associates of the Russian government's secret services. That's why Poland expelled 45 people just on that date. The Polish government maintains that the officials were violating the Vienna Convention by using their diplomatic credentials for espionage and activities incompatible with diplomatic status. Moscow, also at that time in 2022, rejected the accusations, saying they were unfounded. Today, when we look back, we say, well, they were right. The Polish were right, weren't they? At that time, there were many doubts. Back then, reports claimed the Polish were exaggerating, but now it seems they really weren't, right? Poland has shut Russian consulates and further reduced diplomatic presence. And 2024 is accelerating. Starting from the broader conflict that is happening right now and is getting closer and closer to the border with this one, with Poland through Lviv, but also through Belarus, it's starting to get more and more complicated. No, well, let's move on. Other matters. We have other topics too, which are also important, so let's set this aside. But there's a new Russian bombing that has left 3 people dead, and it practically left Ukraine without power, without electricity. And it's an issue that's constant right now in the effort to cause blackouts. In the middle of winter, and this winter, on top of that, is going to be intense, right? And it's happening. Well, right now there's a situation where Russia is under fire. 30 missiles were launched, all of them aimed at electricity generation areas. And because of this, things have gotten even more complicated. The massive bombardment with missiles and also with drones has already caused several injuries, in addition to the 3 people who died. This is right before Christmas, isn't it? I mean, it's gonna be a Christmas, well, really in the dark, right? That's also an issue, huh? Tough, right? And it's part of the reality that's still there, right? In those years, right? By the way, changing the subject, not moving on to other matters. Vladimir Putin, they say, is pretending to hold peace talks, but he doesn't accept any of the conditions proposed by the United States or Ukraine, says Ivan Preprosheski, an expert on Russia. No, he says that, well, this is a political scientist who has specialized in Russia's behavior. They say, look, don't fall into the trap, right? They'll spend months or years negotiating, but it won't lead anywhere, right? The war will continue until Putin's objective, well, continues and is achieved, right? That's basically the idea. So, well, at least the warning is there, right? Donald Trump would have issued an ultimatum to Venezuela. Obviously, it's a topic that closes the year, and it closes a year that's been complicated in that regard. For Maduro's regime, in which it becomes more and more clear. Trump, what's going to happen, right? Apparently, at least Trump says it would be smart for him to leave. On a topic that has been discussed several times, Trump issues this direct ultimatum to Nicolas Maduro and leaves open the possibility of an intervention inside Venezuela. The United States once again raises the tone against Caracas. President Trump delivers the message, which is already being interpreted as a kind of military ultimatum. He assures that it would be smart to leave the country as soon as possible, because there will be greater consequences. During the press conference, these briefings that have been happening lately, he assures that it probably does depend on this Maduro, whether he leaves peacefully or not, otherwise there could be consequences. He does not rule out actions within Venezuelan territory and hints that the time for diplomacy is simply running out. No, what we're probably going to see here is more than a ground intervention, I think. It's not that they're going to keep putting pressure with the issue of the oil tankers. They're not going to focus on that topic. And well, this would be, let's say, the beginning, apparently, of the end of that regime. The president reiterates without presenting public evidence that the Venezuelan government would be sending, even to this day, more material, more substances, even illegal ones, and even sending cartel criminals to the United States. Up until now, well, that narrative, at least that one about criminals being sent by Maduro, hasn't been proven. No, because he says that even this is an asylum or something like that, but he doesn't say they're sending them to the United States, right? What is shown is that it could be that both Mexico and Brazil are acting as a kind of country. Neutral, where they try to have some kind of dialogue to get closer in order to avoid a conflict in that area. But at least on the part of Colombia, they are asking for a return to democratic order, and that also draws attention. Isn't that it? Let's also wait for Brazil's and Mexico's requests, not to return to democratic order. No, but well, the tensions are still there, although, well, we already know that, right? The strategy is to put media pressure and then, at the last minute, only half of what they say actually happens. Or not even that, right? On the other hand, there's also a very curious comment from Katz over there in Israel, and according to what the Israeli Defense Minister Katz shows, it's that there would actually be a plan. Yesterday we were talking about at least having some kind of base inside Gaza on Israel's part, but then he himself took it back. I mean, he promised that there could even be settlements inside Gaza. Settlements of people from Israel living inside Gaza. Afterwards, and everything, he removed the comment. Israel Katz publicly states that Israel will never leave Gaza, and that they are going to rebuild settlements in the north of the enclave. Something unprecedented. His words were spoken at the Beryl Settlements event in the West Bank, where the construction of 1,200 new Jewish homes is also being celebrated. Katz even spoke about sending Nahal groups, a historic formula that combines military presence and civilian settlement used in the past to create permanent settlements. He also clashed with President Trump's 20-point plan, which calls for Israel's withdrawal, in which he basically says they're not going to do it to us. So, hours later, Katz's office stated the government doesn't plan settlements, and that his words were only in the context of security. In other words, at the last minute, he said one thing and then got scolded, because that totally contradicts what the United States has been proposing. And then he said, no, he was talking about other things. He wasn't talking about security or I don't know what. Well, that's kind of how things are on that topic, right? And it's part, let's say, of what's happening. Let's move on to other important matters as well. Let's go to the comments. We'll get to the comments in a bit or come back if there's any interesting news, but let's quickly go to the comments. Hey, the issue with number 3 is really strange. And above all, because some of the things that have been mentioned from the beginning are slowly starting to be confirmed, right? And others, on the contrary. For example, there are topics like the size, which apparently is going to be smaller than what was originally thought. No, let's see how everything is. Great, cheers to Joel. Are you driving? So, keep your eyes on the road, and it's great that you can listen to us. I send you a big greeting. And to the whole community that watches us, whether you're listening to us in the car or watching us on the screen or your phone, right? Thank you very much. Most people still watch us on their phones, but there's a growing community watching on screens too, right? Thank you very much. And hopefully you can send us a comment there. Wouldn't that be great? We're going to put the chat right here in front so we can read it and everyone can see us reading it. That's great. It says, Joel says, okay. And how have you been? Panterita? Very well. Thank you, Panterita. Greetings, God. I'll continue, he says. Poland is next to Russia. Yes, actually, it's right next to Kaliningrad. Kaliningrad belongs to Russia, but it's not attached. Look, if you notice, it's not connected to mainland Russia, so to speak. That's what it is, right? Poland is Russia's neighbor through Kaliningrad. This little piece you see here? Well, that's Russia, right? That's where it shares a border with Russia. No, through mainland Russia, because if you look right here in the middle between Poland and mainland Russia, there's Poland, on this side there's Ukraine, and over here there's Lithuania and Latvia, right? But this little piece, which by the way they took during World War II, well, that's this one, so that's the neighborhood, let's say, not over there. Greetings, God, I'll continue. Francisco says, how are you, Francisco Arce? Greetings, very good. What's up? How are you doing? Who's there? Pixel says, how are you? Greetings all the way from Chile. How are you doing? It's good to see you here. Marisol, how are you? How have you been? Greetings all the way to Connecticut, to the United States. Very good. What's up? Sol Garcia as well. Jose Zarate as well. Good morning. How are you doing? George Lopez says it's going to stay in Jupiter's orbit and will loop around to shoot back out the way it came, says George. How have you been, George? It would be amazing if it did that, right? Rodrigo, how are you, Isaac? Like debris from an explosion in space, it remains chemically reactive as it floats. How have you been, Isaac? Hello, Isaac Vargas. Misterio del Universo says that you have very limited knowledge. How have you been? Joel Fernando says that if not, he sends his greetings. Good day, Mr. Daniel. How have you been? Yes, 3 out of 3, then it heads to Jupiter and one of its moons. It entered or will enter the Hill sphere around March. But it's moving so fast that it would just pass straight through. Yes, it would slow down much more. So yes, but there, that would be the total confirmation that it's a ship, right? So far it hasn't happened, right? If it does, it'll be around March. Right? Imagine it slows down and goes in. Well, that would be the confirmation. And besides, there are probes there, right? There are probes from Earth there. They could, well, show a bit of this behavior if it were to happen, but yeah, it would be super crazy. Greetings, Carl. How have you been? Says Alpha driving the Atlas, Dan Friega, the ALF right, and going all out. Adelson, how have you been? Very good. says Adelson. I want you in the back. Awesome. Greetings. I know Carlos Martinez. How are you doing? Yeah, well, now I think that a lot of the community isn't on vacation, and we're not on vacation either. We're still here working with a lot of pleasure, right? And sharing with you all the information, you know? I don't mock or laugh at those who disagree, and I don't force my beliefs or doubts on anyone either. How have you been? Greetings, Carlos Chavarro. Greetings, very good and well to the whole community, so a big greeting, says Perla. Good afternoon, the apocalypse has started, haha, I'm just having lunch, how have you been? Very good, Aurora, how have you been? Greetings. Very good. Well, it's good to see you. It's good to be here with Retreat. Well, alright, let's go. Monica Polanco, greetings from Spain. Very good, Francisco, and to the whole community, thank you very much. Hope you're all well. Have an excellent afternoon, but not a Christmas one. Let's hope we're all well. We'll be back in a little while. Surely, wherever we are, if there's something important to mention, we'll do it. Big hug, and see you in a little while. See you later.
Thank you for watching the PP News Live, where the events of planet Earth and outer space secrets are analyzed like nowhere else. Thanks for subscribing.